What's up, guys? Dave Lipson here. And today we are going to talk about a really important training principle, one that may be the magic ticket for you in terms of amping things up and serving as a catalyst for continued progress. And honestly, something that is missing in most gyms that you'll ever enter into. It's the process of progressive overload. We're going to talk about what it is, why you need it, how to do it, and the context for it. And hopefully, we can give you guys some really good answers and guidance for the next time you are hammering your chest day, or your back day, or your leg day, and what you need to be thinking about and aiming for to maybe get things moving. Now, progressive overload, guys, I want to give you guys a almost a 30,000 foot view subtext to all of this. It's a very, very fancy word, right? It sounds cool when you're in the gym and you're a trainer saying, "Oh, progressive overload," and I feel progressively overloaded all the time. But the truth is, progressive overload is based on a very simple theory. It's the general adaptation syndrome that was originally hypothesized by Hans Seal in 1909. The syndrome says an organism tends to adapt to the stress you place upon it. So the idea of progressive overload is playing on that concept of adaptation in your body. Your body wants to do one thing. It wants to survive. So when you apply some stress to it, it has an alarm type of response, and then it quickly adapts and accommodates to that stress, and that stress no longer presents a threat because we have essentially changed our bodies to help meet it. And this process kind of continues, especially within the scope of training. You can imagine if you're a new athlete and you've never stepped foot in a gym and you just go to the gym one day and do anything, doesn't matter what, you just do anything, that's going to create enough stress for you to probably start to change and begin the process of adaptation. Maybe you start putting on a little muscle, losing a little body fat, increasing your range of motion, all that good stuff. Okay. Now, once you've adapted to that accommodation process is where typically you'll see things stall, right? It's not enough. We need to do more. So what's the next step? Oh, well, shit, let's try practicing some really good high utility compound functional movements. Just build a vernacular for movement. The weight doesn't matter. The reps don't matter. Just the literal act of practicing these movements is going to do wonders for you. This is kind of like the honeymoon period in CrossFit. You guys ever been there? Just the first time you did an overhead squat or a thruster, there didn't even need to be any weight on an empty barbell. And you were like, holy shit, this is amazing. I'm PRing every day. I'm feeling bigger and stronger. I have more range of motion, all the good stuff. And then it gets to a point where, especially for intermediate athletes, when you built up some capacity and now you're going into the gym and you're familiar with the movements, your body's adapted to the stress of maybe training 5 days a week, adapted to these high utility compound basic movements of squatting and pressing and pulling, that we can sometimes see things start to stall out, plateau, and even go down sometimes. And progressive overload is increasing the stress that you're putting on yourself in your training sessions strategically by either maybe putting a little bit more weight on the bar. That's one way to increase the intensity, or doing maybe a little bit more repetition or volume. That's one way to increase the intensity. And in some cases, even doing things with like better control or increased range of motion is a way to increase the intensity. But most people, honestly, are not doing that. They're doing the same movements with the same weight, the same way, and they end up kind of stuck at a certain point. Not a bad, place to be. They probably have decent capacity, but I know all you guys out there are not looking to stay the same. You're probably looking to change. You're looking to be your best. You want to see what you're capable of. So you need to know how to progressively overload your training properly. And there are two different models you can use to do this. One is called a linear periodization model. So the linear periodization model is built on keeping things consistent, the same, right? So let's say you got a routine on Monday, you train your legs, Tuesday, chest, back, shoulders, arms, through Friday, and you're doing the same movements too. You'll start with RDL, and then you'll do a back squat, and then you'll finish with some lunges. Or you do a flat bar bench press, and then an incline dumbbell press, and then some flies. Or on back day, you might do some pull-ups, and then some rack pulls and bent over rows, and then maybe some lat pull downs or something like that. But every move, I can really go down a rabbit hole here, but every time you train, it's the same thing. So for this is actually a very effective model for new athletes and for athletes to a point where just the consistency of doing the same movements and really trying to push it, trying to squeak out that next rep or getting a forced rep or putting one more pound on the bar or whatever it is, like you can get some really good progress with this to a point, but there is a shelf life on it. And this is the downside of linear periodization, is like you'll get to a point where when you always barbell back squat, you're just going to tap that out. And there's just not going to be any more room to get a little bit more capacity or a little bit more intensity out of the back squat because you're just so familiar with it that it's just not enough of a new type of stress to create that catalyst, whether that be something like a neuroendocrine response, and that has to do with like your coordination, the signals your muscles are sending to your brain, just understanding how the brain communicates with the muscles in a very sophisticated way. And you have these things called Golgi tendon organelles that are very sensitive to movements, to planes, to range of motion, to muscle tension, all that kind of stuff. So if it's always the same, that might not be enough to create that neuroendocrine response to start secreting all those really great anabolic hormones that drive growth. And I think at this point, these are a lot of intermediate level athletes that will sometimes realize that, okay, this linear periodization model, unless I keep rotating my program, is just not going to work for me in the long term. And this is where I think an undulating periodization model comes in really, really well, especially with regard to progressive overload. So if you could think about progressive overload in that linear periodization model would be like, let's call it taking the test. Okay, you're going to test your back squat, you're going to test your bench press, you're going to test your rack pull, and it's the same. You're always taking the test. Undulating periodization is working the angles. It's not directly attacking that movement, but it's attacking variations of that movement, different subsection of that movement, different ranges of motion of that movement. So here's an example for something like the rack pull. Instead of doing rack pulls again, maybe we'll do rack pulls against band one week. Maybe we'll do a sumo stance RDL one week. Maybe we'll do a deadlift or even a deficit deadlift another week. Now they're all similar in that there's a hip hinge, there's a function there, but certain portions, ranges of motion, or capacities are being challenged in different ways. And because we're working the angles, wherever it is you're weak, wherever it is you're kind of lacking, that gives you an opportunity to fix that chink in your armor. And when you go back to that full movement, holy shit, you're going to be stronger. And that's what's really cool about this undulating periodization model is by working the angles, by doing the homework instead of always just taking tests, you can really make a lot of progress, not just with the things that you're not so good at, but also for the things that you're very well versed in terms of improvement. And that process of challenging that neuroendocrine response or giving those Golgi tendon organelles new stimulus to continue to adapt to allows you to kind of stay in a model like this for an extended period of time. So if you think about some of our programs that we offer at Thunderbro, you've got the 90-day Get Huge program. This is a program for beginners, for people coming off of injury, for people new to hypertrophy training, for people who are maybe trying to just like blend some basic hypertrophy training with some CrossFit that they're doing in their affiliate. And this is a linear periodization model where you're doing the same movements, the same lifts, and every month we rotate. So you do the same exercises and the same workouts for a full month. Then you take a deload week. We rotate the exercises. We give you some different variations. We even change the reps up a little bit. And then you come back to another linear periodization model for that second, and then finally that third phase. And this can work really well. And I think that this is a great way, honestly, to start beginners, to start building capacity in some of the core basic foundational movements. And then we've got a program like Muscle Anarchy, which is that undulating periodization model, where we've got that framework of legs, chest, back, shoulders, and arms Monday through Friday, but not every day is going to be the same. It's kind of a longer rotation. You might not see the same core exercises on for 6 more weeks before you actually go back to them. And this is where, in both scenarios, honestly, recording is really important. You need to know how strong you are in a lot of these lifts, especially the ones that you're going to repeat. And when you look at your training, you don't need to record every single lift. Some stuff is just, honestly, it's more about just like getting a stimulus, getting a pump, just really fatiguing and exhausting a muscle. But for the movements that involve heavy mechanical loading, and what I mean by that is like, hey, bro, if the bar ain't bending, you're just pretending. This is where we're working for lower repetitions, for higher, percentages of loading, and we're essentially testing your strength. These are the ones that you want to write that down in your logbook. You want to know what you could do for a rack pull and a rack pull versus bands and how heavy those bands were or whatever it might be, so that the next time you go back to it, you can try to beat it. And this style, whether you're doing it with linear periodization or undulating periodization, It's fun because now you have a target. You have something to strive for. You're not just going to see how you feel that day, but you come into the gym with a game plan. You probably even know how you're going to warm up. I'm going to do 5 here and then 5 there, and then my working set. And then you've got your top set. And the top set, for you guys who've never heard that term before, is essentially that's the test for the day. That's where we want to really take you to something like an RPE 10. RPE is your rate of perceived exertion. And an RPE 10 on a scale of 1 to, let's say, 11 is working to mechanical failure, where you're no longer actually have the capacity to like perform the lift properly. That's a good test. And then an RPE 11 would be even like something like a forced rep, which is maybe you're getting some help with the rep this time, but as you get the stress and build the capacity, hopefully the next time you don't need, help on that 10th rep or whatever it might be. And in the undulating periodization model as well, like, just having an idea of where you're at with all your movement variations and really what the target is. When you do a new movement, congratulations, you're going to PR because you've never done it before. And it's going to be enough. It's going to be enough of a stimulus to probably get a good response. But as you start to repeat these things, and especially the heavy mechanical loading stuff, it does become important to really work with purpose and have a goal, have a target, and try to push that target. And to set yourself up for success, you got to think about this as almost more of a sport than just an activity. Like, this is a game. You're in a competition. You're in a competition with yourself, but it's still a competition. So you got to bring your game face. You got to have the right environment. You got to have your training buddies. You got to have somebody there to spot you. And even if there's no one there to be with you, to push you, or to, kind of take you mentally to that next level, sometimes even just like recording yourself going for a lift when you're like, hey, going for a new 8 rep max, here we go, let's see if I get it. Even that could be enough sometimes mentally to try to take yourself to that point. People got to train hard for it to be effective. Hard means something different to everybody. Like we said, for the newbie, hard might be like walking in the door of the gym. For someone like you guys, it's kind of an intermediate level athlete, you probably know how to train with good intensity. It's doing the things that you don't want to do, and trying to squeak out that last rep. And as you get more capacity in movements, right, as you become a better and better athlete, you'll find that those margins for progressive overload are going to become slimmer. Like, when you started doing these lifts, you might have like 25-pound PRs every time you come in to do that lift because you're in that honeymoon period, right? Like, but once you get some decent capacity, now you're not fighting for miles, you're fighting for inches. And this is where something like 2.5 pound or even 1 pound plates can come in really handy for you to make those small jumps, or even just trying to get one extra rep or even a forced rep where a buddy helps you out with maybe 1 or 2 more to squeak out those little inches, because those inches perform consistently over a long period of time, equate to miles. And that's how you overcome these plateaus. For athletes that have been doing this for a while and are just kind of leveled out, you got to find ways to give your body a little bit more. So if you're interested in this stuff, please come check out Muscle Anarchy. You love that. Check out our 90-Day Get Huge program. Learn more about progressive overload, and let me know questions, comments, all that stuff below. Hope you enjoyed this talk on progressive overload. Buy your 2.5 pound plates, and we will see you on the boards.